I'll note for everybody, she has started the recording of the meeting. So I will call the meeting to order. And just first off to note that public question period will be held at the end of the meeting. It was not noted on the agenda, but that was just a little slip. So we will have a public question period at the end. But I would like to first acknowledge that we are meeting today on the traditional territory of the Squamish. Oh no, I was in Vancouver before. That's not the Squamish. You were in Squamish. The Qualicum and Snawas First Nations, and we thank them for allowing us to live, work, and play on their territory, which they have guided and stewarded through many, many years. Today is a special budget board meeting, and as folks know, for a special board meeting, we will have only one topic to discuss. You received the package and agenda in the time requirement of ahead of 48 hours in calling a meeting. So I think we've duly met those stipulations. Mr. Amos has prepared extensive backgrounder for folks to add to some of the commentary that has been made at previous meetings. And I'm hoping trustees have been able to take the time of the last 4 or 5 days to seek out the further information or queries and things that they wanted to know a little bit more about so that we can proceed with this evening. As you know, our first item on the agenda is to unanimously approve 3 readings for the agenda this evening. So I will start things off with the first aspect of it, that the Board of Education, School District 69 Qualicum, give all 3 readings to approve the annual budget bylaw for the 2024-2025 fiscal year at its special board meeting of April 29th, 2024. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please, trustees? Moved by trustee Kellogg, seconded by trustee Kurland. Now that the this aspect of the agenda is on the floor, it belongs to the assembled. Mr. Amos, would you like to run us all through or give some highlights to some of the information that you prepared in the package?
I will. Thank you very much. Sure. So yes, there's a briefing note that sort of describes the budget process that we've taken this year and to be honest, in past. Some of the information that's shared in the briefing note is kind of dealing with the transparency aspects that are being required of boards to share out the information, share out financial information, be more transparent in the process, so that obviously individuals who are inquiring can see what we've done to date and therefore how we got here. So again, what you're seeing in there is a bit of a discussion on not only the work that we've done at the board level in terms of public and stakeholder engagement, but also some discussion in terms of how the budget is prepared. And it's at this point, it's prepared looking at the amended budget of 23-24, brings forward any new grants, removes any one-time grants, takes into account obviously changes in revenues, changes in costs. And again, we've had those discussions in public in terms of some of the cost pressures. It includes obviously, in this case, the increased costs associated with the labor settlement funding, and so that's embedded into the annual budget, as well as any obviously inflationary costs. At the end of the day, it's just a reminder to the board that this is an annual budget prepared with estimates, with projected enrollments, with estimated costs. Knowing that we have to have this submitted to the ministry by the end of June, but it really is about what is the plan for the new year. And so again, really it is a moving target, as Trustee Young likes to say. It is a bit of an evolving budget. It does move along as we gain information. We'll have our first snapshot of the enrollment in September, and that may modify our projected enrollments kind of thing. We'll have another chance to see the grant recalculation in December when those numbers are sent off to the ministry, so that by February of now 2025, the board will have the opportunity to see the amended budget and to provide additional input in terms of how staffing was modified in anticipation of September's kids. And so again, recognizing that this is the best information that we have going forward, things will still change in September, possibly new divisions if the kids come in. New divisions may need to be added. New additional staffing may need to be added to support the kids that are coming in. And that is our normal process in terms of how we set up the new year. We often, and you'll see that in kind of in the requests and in the response, some of these are are recognizing that in some cases we may have to add back those staffing that we're taking out, but recognizing that based on what we know of the kids, again, projections, and based on what we know of the needs of the kids that are certainly in the system at this time and anticipated to be there in September, we're kind of adjusting our staffing accordingly. And so again, truly this is about a bit of a moving target with the best information that we have now, staff recommendations in terms of what we are proposing that we need to do to balance the budget with the least amount, recognizing that all of these reductions will have an impact, but with the hopefully the least amount of impact on the system itself. So again, we've modified based on our conversation last week. We've modified that one sheet of paper basically that talks about the 24-25 budget considerations, just added a little bit more added a little bit more narrative to some of the requests and some of the responses, just to provide a little bit of more feedback to the board based on some of their early observations. So yeah, at the end of the day, this budget was prepared based on the special budget meeting that we had 2 weeks ago now, 2 less a day. And so these considerations were brought forward at that time. Staff asked, is this how the budget needs to be, or should the budget be prepared using these considerations? It was responded that the board expected as much, and that's what was presented certainly last week and is now before you today. Yeah, hopefully a lot of the background information speaks to itself. I'm not going to belabor this, but I'll open it for a discussion if there's a desire.
Are there any questions in the first aspect of things? Trustee Austin.
Thanks, Ron. So one of my questions is around the NRT. And from what I understand, this may be like, this is a one-off, perhaps, a one-off budget piece. It probably won't be in the budget for the 25-26 year.
Superintendent Jory, but no, I wouldn't assume that, but go ahead, Superintendent Jory.
No, I would not assume that. I
Okay.
am hoping that this will be an ongoing practice. I mean, the quantum of it may be tuned up or tuned down depending on how well it's used and how much interest there is. But I really do believe that this is the way to get at the strategic plan, to get at our practice, to allow our teachers a way to discuss their practice and work on such things that are of interest to them or challenging for them, including numeracy, Indigenous content, anything to do with the new curriculum, and anything that is of interest in regard to inclusion, among other things. Those would be at the top of my list, but all the challenges that we have that are revealed through our planning process, through our discussions, through our data, they should all be on the table. And to me, this structured PLC model is the way to get at it and give people a chance to do that with some confidence. And so we're in the early stages. We've been working on this in small pieces all around the district, and our hope is that it becomes pervasive and that student outcomes improve as a result.
Thank you, Dr. Jory. Associate Superintendent, Ms. Wilson.
I just wanted to share something with the board about a practice that we have had in our district in prior years. If you remember, we had something called ERP, or Early Reading Intervention. We also had something called Reading Mentors. And up until 4 years ago, when we had to do some scale backs, we had reading mentors in our system that equated to just under 2 FTE. The reading mentors were assigned to each one of our schools, and there was a small FTE amount, predominantly at the elementary schools, where the reading mentors came out of their schools up to 8 times, sometimes 5 times per year, became specialized in some reading strategies, and then went back to their schools and shared the reading strategies with the rest of the staff. What the NRT is allowing us to do is really not focus on one particular area, but focus on the areas that staff need. So this is reinstating some staffing that was in our system some years back and for years that we had to make some difficult decisions around about 4 years ago with our staffing. I just wanted to remind ourselves of that type of staffing that we've had in our system before. And it's been up for conversation at each one of our board conversations at this time of year.
Ms. Wilson, Trustee Kurland.
When I was teaching at KSS, something like the NRT was our dream. We used to just fantasize on being able to get together with other colleagues and go through this stuff. So I'm totally in support of the NRT. I think it's great that finally it's, matured enough that we can do this. It was just a dream of a lot of teachers to unsilo themselves and be able to learn more about what's going on in other disciplines.
Thanks, Trustee Kurland. Are there any other comments before I call a question on the unanimous? Oh, Trustee Austin.
Thank you again. I want to ask this question because, I hear this come up, especially during budget talks or other things, and there's instability or lack of trust in the system if we don't pass the budget or things like that. So that's the sort of line I hear. There's instability, lack of trust in the system. So I guess my question is, I'm putting it out there, how do we address and how do we respond to parents, and trustees have been receiving some letters this week, who are expressing great feelings of instability and lack of trust in the system. And because when they see this budget and they see, I know, and I understand how it works, it's based on needs and things, but what people are seeing is a drop of 56 hours of EAA or CYCW time. And that's creating anxiety for our families. So how would we address that for them? Dr.
Jory.
Yeah, that is a question that I think is going to have an unsatisfying answer, I'm afraid. I think that one of the things that happens during budget, and has happened, this is not a here thing, this is an everywhere thing, is when we're faced with questions, when we're faced with challenges, we want some assurance that the budget reflects additional resources to deal with those problems. And that's the answer that we have been given for, giving people for probably 100 years. Well, we put more money into this, where we put more money into that. And people over time have associated certain problems with certain solutions. And I think that is a simplification that we're endeavoring to break out of. And rather than say, okay, here's an issue, let's throw money at that specifically, let's add people to the solution. What we're proposing here is a way for us to respond to practice and needs in the classroom that is very customizable, right? And the issue that we're having here is that it won't make any sense until we do it. And the explanation of it is a very complex thing, whereas the addition of more money in a category is a simple thing, right? And so what I'm asking us all to do is to understand what we're trying to do and be able to speak to what we're trying to do, and to support what we're trying to do, because it is complex, and it requires, I think, a more complex narrative, which requires more time and more patience. So it's challenging. I get that, but I want to get off that treadmill of doing the same thing, and I'm going to say, generally being unsatisfied with the results of that same thing.
And I think we have to look at our system as being, every year we are right sizing our needs, our students' needs and kids in classrooms needs, and that changes every year. The dynamics of that changes every year. And what looks to us now as ways and means to balance the budget, and I'll recognize Trustee Young, September things may change and things may shift and things like that. And I think we need to, with the amount of funding that we are predicting and looking to, 500,000 over a $77 million budget, I think we find things, the ground can shift, and we can be very, as our Secretary Treasurer has said within his backgrounder, we can be very optimistic that this budget is trending well for us, and it's realistic to our overall picture of the total budget of 77 some odd million, $72 million. And so I don't see it as being where a number of other school districts to our south find themselves, and that we need to, as we do every year, kind of predict things for now and do with the best information we have now, and then we go forward in September with the actual wetlands in our plates, and although it is a slang vernacular, bums in seats, we need to have that kind of better picture of things, I think, to work our strategies around come that time. And it's always moving. It's a moving target. Trustee Young.
Yes, Superintendent Jory, you had your hand up.
Oh.
Are you
Oh, sorry.
done?
Yep. No, I'll just add in that, we've been in this conversation for a series of weeks, even months now, and Mr. Amos has done a very good job of painting the picture. And that picture is not specific to the Qualicum School District. All around the province, we've got budget pressures, rising costs, and in some cases, some enrollment to offset it, and ours not so much. So we know what we're dealing with here. It's not a great news story. And we've made some adjustments across the board to try to, get back in position here. But what I'm proposing here is that the NRT, at the very least, can be a bit of a good news story and offer some amount of hope to anyone who's out there in their classroom struggling with whatever it may be, the inclusion pressures, behavior issues, not knowing how to get to Indigenous content comfortably, the numeracy issue that we keep talking about. Any of those things, this can provide some way to get to that and should be seen as a positive. And I don't want to let go of that positive, because I do think that this is going to have some impact on the system. I think people will see it that way once they engage in it.
Trustee Young, then Trustee Kurland.
Yeah, I wasn't going to speak on this because really what we're talking about here is do we want to do all three readings tonight? So I wasn't going to speak on it, but Trustee Flynn, Chair Flynn, you kind of got me headed where I'm wanting to go now, which is, and I appreciate all the emails. It's really nice to know that there are people out there who care enough to send an email. The difficulty for us, I think, as a board, is every year we have to make very difficult decisions. And I think where I would like to see us talk about tonight is if we are optimistic and we do have a little bit more money in September, which I'm always hopeful about, where do we, what are our priorities in terms of putting money back into the budget? And I've looked at the 5 things that we've regrettably had to cut back on, and I have my priority list, but I do want to get through. Are we going to do 3 readings tonight? We're not going to do 3 readings tonight, and then we can have a larger discussion.
Trustee Kurland.
Thank you. So Yeah, the problem here is that, when I started teaching, there was no designated students at all. And as people got smarter, more educated, we've learned the spectrums that students are on. And so until now, we have incredible range of student behaviors and abilities that we understand. But one of the things that is very important to these students is that contact of an EA that they have. It doesn't matter how well trained the teacher is or how many degrees. I don't know how many classes I taught, different classes I taught at KSS. I taught math 10, science 9, science 10, yearbook, PE, um, uh, guidance, just I could go on and on and on. I've moved from all those classes, but the thing that was constant for these children was their EA that they could have and relate to. And so that's part of the problem is that, we've gotten smarter, and our educational abilities, to understand the difficulty of these students has gone up, but we're still kind of trying to do the same things. Having well-trained teachers is absolutely what we need, but we also need people in the classroom that can be with these students and understand them, make them feel at home. And that's what we're getting, in terms of the parents' letters. So, I would hope that, when we find some more money, that this is what we do. If anybody's laid off, that we reinstate them, because it's very important to our system that the kids have this kind of continuity.
I have trustee Kellogg and then trustee Austin. And then I think if we can, we'll get the vote on at least the first aspect and then see where we stand. Trustee Kellogg.
So I just want to comment that the emails that I got, because I'm the parent of a young woman that has Down syndrome, I know that through her school years, there was a lot of stress put on the family worrying about whether or not she was supported well enough in school. And she's 40 years old, so when she went to school, things were very different. But she was probably one of the first students in the Burnaby School District to be integrated. And that was a scary time for me. And it was very comforting for me as a family and for her as an individual to know that there's that one person that's out on the playground with them, that's in the classroom with them, that goes to PE with them. And I know not all kids need a full-time EA, but that was the message that I got from the emails. The families are concerned. They feel that their kids are under anxiety because they're not being supported well enough. And so I would hope that in September, if the money comes back, if we get some money back, that the EAs that those 56 hours would be put back into the system. I don't have a problem passing the budget tonight, but I would hope that people are listening and that in September, that money will go back in.
Thank you, trustee Kellogg. Trustee Austin, last time.
Well, I suppose this is a comment on calling the question, because this is, I am still, this is why I'm asking the questions, because I want to know if I'm going to vote in favor or not for this motion. So this is the time for me to ask questions. It's not because I could take this because I don't feel like perhaps I've gotten the answers that I want. So for me right now, I don't think it's time to call the question until trustees are satisfied or have asked the questions that they want to ask. I think this is the time to ask them on this particular motion.
Yep, no, absolutely. But you've had 3 opportunities to speak.
I know, and I keep waiting, for other trustees, and I only ask one question at a time. So, so I am going to go back because again, I'm hearing, from trustees, and I think that's great, saying, well, if there happens to be, we get a little bump in money from the September count and how things fall out in September. I guess that begs the question to me, if we think we have to reinstate EAs come September, if we have the money, I guess my question is, if we think there's a need for it in September, because we have, more or if we get that extra money, it's recognition. I guess that's what I'm looking for from the board, from the senior staff, that there's a recognition that this will definitely be, you know, one of the first places we look. And am I getting that from Peter, Jillian?
I think you've heard the message clearly from Trustee Young and Trustee Kellogg, and
I've
I
heard it
think
from the trustees, but I'm looking to our educational staff.
Superintendent Jory.
Yeah, let's keep in mind, and Mr. Amos has put this, you know, graphic up, this chart up a number of times, that the EAs is the one position that's really grown relative to other positions in the school district over time. And so I always get uncomfortable with the narrative that this is, you know, that this is a place we're cutting or intentionally going at. We are drawing down all over the place. This is one area that, of course, is you know, part of this calibration. So, you know, I'm not sure I'm in full agreement here. However, if what the Board of Education is saying is that in order to approve what we've put on the table today, that we're doing so under the condition that in September, if there's more money on the table, that this is the first place that we put back, then I'm satisfied to do that. That is a non-issue for me. I can absolutely go along with that.
Trustee Young, and then Associate Superintendent Wilson.
Okay, so I'm going to tell you my priority list because obviously we're having this discussion now. So number one for me would be I want to support the kids in the classroom. That's what I hear the board saying. I think we've been very clear about that. So the first thing that I would want to do is to put back those CYC hours. And I trust Associate Superintendent Wilson knows exactly where those stress points will be. Second for me would be the district supply budget, because that supply budget fuels a lot of the things that kids can do in schools. So that's my motivation for that. Third, I think the summer works because we know that we want to keep our facilities looking really awesome. And that supports our students as well because they feel good about going to school, as we saw last year. And then the school admin assistant would be 4, and 5 would be international, because quite frankly, my understanding of a lot of international work now is some of it is being done virtually. So I think that's a place where we can trim a bit. And so that's my priority list. And yeah, I get it. This time of the year is a really tough time of the year. And you know, I went through COVID budgets. I was very optimistic at one point that the federal government was going to kick in funds and all this sort of stuff. And in the end, we ended up going into the hole big time. And I'm not prepared to do that again at this point. I want to wait until the money is in the bank and then restore the supports that Associate Superintendent Wilson, because I trust her, figures that we need in the classroom. So that's me. Thank you.
So Superintendent Wilson, any added commentary?
Yeah, if I may, I just want to speak to a couple of things about what we do in our unique district. And you've heard me talk about this before, where in many districts, students that are identified based on ministry criteria are the children that get supports in classrooms that look like the educational assistance support or child and youth care worker support, predominantly educational assistance support. In our district for over a decade, we've said a child's designation as it pertains to the Ministry of Education does not tell us anything about the needs of that particular child. It's a very clinical medical formula, and it doesn't tell us who Jill is as a student and how Jill and what Jill needs for her support. We talk to our teachers, we talk to our administrators, we look at the IEPs, we do lots of work. We have our school reviews that you hear about, that our current principal of Tandy Gunn and I go around to schools, and we have those rich conversations. We will never, ever be able to meet the needs that everybody talks about because we do have a finite budget. You've also heard us talk this year that we got audited. And some of that great work that we do, because it's the right things to do, we were held accountable for, and we were consequenced for, quite frankly. Children have different needs at different times. And it might be a need because they're going through some family dynamics and family situations. It might be a need because they've got some anxiety going on for them. We provide support through EAs, child and youth care workers, our counseling time, or whatever that need is and how we can best suit it. Over the years, this has been a board that said, what is the needs and how we best address it? I want to mention again, this board has given more than what's the ministry or the contractual requirements for counseling, for learning support teachers. We have the best ratio for SLPs in probably on the island, I want to say, but the amount of SLP time we have in our district, we're the envy. We can't do it all. And that's when it becomes those really difficult decisions around what do we do and how do we best meet those needs. Our educational assistants are an integral part of that team that work with students. However, we also know that we find it really, really challenging to find replacements in our educational assistants. So when someone's away, we don't always have that replacement. I know our HR director's online here, and I don't know how many interviews she's done with Tandy Gunn this year to always keep that replenished so that we've got a spare list, but it's hard. And it's hard to function when you don't have the whole team there. So it's really, really complicated, and I don't want you to sit here and think that you're choosing one over the other. You're giving us as a senior team and the system the ability to look at what the needs of the individual kids are and how we can best meet those needs given the parameters that we have to work in. I also wanted to mention ISP because the cut or the deduction in the ISP is going to create some hardship for our ISP program. It's not that it's making it easier in one or the other. Recruitment is different these days. You've heard the federal government talk about reducing the ISP to post-secondary. That's had an impact on our system. We have children not attending because they can't go to post-secondary year. So we have to do a different campaign for our ISP program. So not having that is going to we have to look at it a little bit differently. We'll do it, we'll work through it, but it's not all black and white. It's not all easy answers, and you've got a difficult decision today because we're talking about people, and most importantly, we're talking about best interest of kiddos. So I just wanted to mention those couple of things.
Thanks, Ms. Wilson. So has everybody had an opportunity to ask their questions? And can I call a question on the first aspect to approve the motion to give all 3 readings? Seeing no hands, I'll call a question. All those in favor? Thank you, Trustee Austin. That was carried unanimously. We now can move to first reading to adopt the School District 69 annual budget bylaw in the amount of $72,497,275 for the 2024-2025 fiscal year. I will move that. Do I have a seconder, trustees? Thank you, Trustee Kurland. Are any further questions, or Trustee Austin?
Yeah, I think I'll just take this moment to say that, this has been really challenging for me, and I continue to have doubts and little niggly things. But after hearing trustees this evening and hearing their concerns, I feel like this is something we will be following up on and watching very closely and seeing how it continues, how it falls out. And I would encourage parents as well to help us. And if there's concerns, to continue to raise some of those concerns with your child's teacher or administration, because that's how we can best do these budgets going forward. So thank you.
Austin. The first reading is moved by myself, seconded by Trustee Kurland. Sorry, Trustee Young.
Not a big deal. We do have the first reading on the floor, right?
Correct.
Yes, we do. Okay. So just lost track there for a second. So the other piece that I was going to add to what Trustee Austin said is we have this long budget process, and I know that the schools, the PACs, you know, we try and get the word out, but come to the budget discussions if you can. There's public ones in the evening. You know, it's really, really important for parents to weigh in at that point too. And they happen in February, and then they happen again after we get our special little envelope in April. And you'll see these are not easy. These are not easy decisions to make. So there's a lot of work that goes on behind the scenes. I really encourage people to get involved.
Thank you, Trustee Young. Any further comments, trustees, or I'll call the question for first reading. All those in favor? Contrary? Or in favor, Trustee Austin, I'm sorry. In favor or contrary? Your favor. Okay, carried unanimously. And I'll move that the second reading to adopt School District 69 annual budget bylaw in the amount of $72,497,275 for the 2024-2025 fiscal year. Moved by myself. Could I have a seconder, trustees? Thank you, Trustee Kurland. Any further commentary? Call a question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. And third and final reading to adopt School District 69 Qualicum annual budget bylaw in the amount of $72,497,275 for the 2024-2025 fiscal year. Could I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Trustee Kellogg. Any further questions, trustees? I think we've heard a summary of, I think, most of our feelings by the group, and would appear to be something to revisit for sure in September with some a clear lens on where things have landed at that point in time. Call a question. All those in favor? Contrary minded? Julie, are you in favor or contrary again? You're contrary? You're up. Okay, carried unanimously. Thank you, trustees. I think that's been a valuable discussion. I appreciate the sentiment of the difficulties and things like that we go through, and the ground does shift from year to year. Let's that be sure, as that's the best and the worst case scenario of the unknowns, is it changes every year and we get a new surprise. That after next year, we're into bargaining, and a few other things may come our way related to bargaining settlements and whether exempt staff is covered. We've had some gifts of late I just recall back last year and Trustee Austin's comments about the 330,000 that we kind of wanted to use as covering ourselves for exempt staff. And in the end, it all disappeared late or early into the new year, and exempt staff was covered by the government as far as their salary increases to be in line with union settlements. So that was a good thing, but that was a 300, I believe, wasn't it, Mr. Amos? $330,000 bill last year that we had as a niggly in the back of our mind. So before we go to Trustee Young and then question period, go ahead, Trustee Young.
I was just going to say there is a question under Q&A. So
under chat.
Do you have that? No, it's under
I
Q&A.
I don't have a Q&A.
Okay, I will try to read it out for you.
Okay. I have chat, but I don't have a Q&A.
Okay. The province announced allocating $30 million across districts over the next 3 years to improve literacy for students. The hope is to provide early screening, K-3, this is something that we know about, but anyway, intervention and outreach support, as well as additional training for teachers and support staff. Can you provide additional information with what the district plans are in terms of how the money will be spent when it rolls out in September?
I'm assuming we've gone to public questions now.
I guess that is a
Yeah.
public question, but I can say that that money is not in play until school year 2025, 2026. That's $30 million over 3 years spread around over 60 school districts. And to this point, the government has not delineated how high paper, how it will be allocated to districts to straight up per capita, say like Feeding Futures and things like that. But it also is not in play until September of 2025, 26. So I hope that answers the question. And folks that are here in attendance, are there any hands up? Please raise hands because I can't see the whole screen here. And the best thing to do is to raise your hand. I do not see any raised hands. So thank you very much, everybody. Thank you for the question as well. From the chat or the Q&A. Oh, there's Q&A. Oh, that's the next one over. Sorry. That's a
You found it.
I found it. Finally. Thank you. Okay, I learned something new every day. Thanks everyone for joining us this evening. And could I have a mover to adjourn? Thank you, Trustee Kellogg. Thanks, everyone. Very good discussion, very good debate. Good information sharing. Thank you. Good night.